3, 2, 1. Fellas, what is going on?
How's it going?
Good, good.
How you doing?
Pretty good. I said the 4 awful words to my girlfriend earlier this week, actually last week, and I'm surprised that she hasn't broken up with me yet.
Oh no!
And I said we should start a diet.
Oh.
And it wasn't more so about her as it was about me, but nonetheless, we still live together and everything's still all good and well. So
you were looking for a supportive partner, I guess. Just like
exactly.
Get the help, yeah.
Exactly. So guys, tonight. Sorry, go ahead, my friend.
No, I was just going to ask. So, how's that going? Is it going well with that, or have you just started, or no?
Going very well. I'm a nutritionist, so just with the 4th of July and everything, kind of fell off the rails a little bit. But this isn't about me. This is about you.
Oh, sure.
So tonight we've got a very special guest. Of course, we are accompanied by Fire and Dice, Keith Healy. How you doing, my man?
Wonderful. How are you?
Good. And then also we have with us the very talented DM of You Rolled a One, Professor Epic, Chris. How you doing tonight, brother?
I'm doing awesome. Very excited to be here and to meet you guys and to talk D&D with some other people who are into it. I don't know if you find it difficult to talk about D&D with other people outside the community at all and try to explain what it is you do. But I love the fact that there's an amazing community that can actually listen to stuff like this and engage with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's every time I try to describe it to anybody that doesn't play D&D, all I say is I can sit here and talk to you till I'm blue in the face, but you have to try it, and that's it. And that's all.
Sometimes I'll just go right into I try to describe it very briefly, but then I'll go right into an encounter with them, and I'll start guiding them down. Like, okay, imagine we're in a hallway and you start wondering. So I'll take them from where they are, like we're sitting in this restaurant, but then someone comes in and what do you do? And I give them a situation, and then they start to get it. And they're like, oh, is it just like that? Yeah, you just role play. So there's no board? Yeah, there's no board.
That's actually a really good idea for how to explain to somebody D&D. I've never thought of that.
Yeah, those are the most common questions I always get is that they start talking about, where's the board? Wait, is this part on a video game? Is this on the TV? And it's just no.
The video game thing always sways me too. I got a lot of people like, oh yeah, I've heard of D&D. That's a game, right? You got to play. So you talk about a video game or people watch you play a video game. I'm like, no, that's not at all what it is.
Right.
Exactly. So, okay, Chris, give us a little bit of background about the game that you run. So I know you guys are available on iTunes, Spotify, a couple of the platforms, but nonetheless, you are the DM of a long-standing campaign. Give us a little bit about You Rolled a One.
Yeah, long-standing. We actually only launched about 2 months ago, May 15th. And so we've only been really launched out this campaign recently. A bunch of friends of mine. Me and D&D have a long-standing relationship. Let me put it that way. I went, high school. I played a lot of D&D, and then I gave it up for a little while I was in college, and then played a little bit more when I started dating a girl who was in a campaign, and then it's kind of come in and out of my life. And recently, I guess I just started playing online with my friends who aren't in the area. I live in Vancouver, but a lot of them are across Canada. But with technology now, we can all record. And we just said, hey, why don't we do a podcast? Why don't we start recording what we're doing? I've had this campaign in my head for a while that I'd run through with some other groups, and I just thought it'd be really great to kind of flesh it out this time with these specific individuals who I've been excited to play with, some of my friends out east. And we didn't really know what it was going to be when we just started recording, as I think a lot of things when you're creative and want to do something, you don't know what it's going to be. But as we started to develop the story, people they just really got into it. The actual the players were super into the idea of playing police officers, and I've always been sort of a sucker for the cop dramas of the kind of 80s and 90s, that kind of gritty feeling to it, I always think back to, I also liked a lot of those 90s thriller movies. I'm thinking of something like Silence of the Lambs or those kind of things where there's kind of a horror element to it too. And basically, I decided to just make a homebrew campaign that would be completely based around the idea of creating those kind of atmospheres where it was fun and engaging and funny because my friends are funny, but also there's kind of a long-standing detective plot that's going on where people are slowly discovering what's going on. And uh, where do you start with like a homebrew world? Most you guys have played a lot of fantasy, I guess. I'm curious about what kind of fantasy you guys tend to like, because then maybe I can show where my perspective on creating this campaign came from. Do you guys have like do you guys have like favorite settings or favorite kind of campaigns that you like running yourself?
Keith, go ahead.
Well, my favorite setting is probably, as far as a pre-written one, is Forgotten Realms.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite. My homebrew is kind of a creation similar to that in that type of world, at least.
Yeah.
Obviously very different the way I built it, but very similar to that setting. That's basically what I kind of gear towards, that, or Faerun, stuff like that.
It's funny when you bring up Forgotten Realms. That's how I got into D&D, was Baldur's Gate. So I have a great love for Forgotten Realms, actually, as part of my where I started. But I always find a lot of fantasy is very much that Forgotten Realms feeling of like, you've got the very good guys over here and the clearly evil guys over here, and there's a lot of fun in that. But and it's always like, you're traveling across Faerun, you're traveling long distances, lots of epic things. But what was cool about Baldur's Gate, and what I actually thought was really fun, was when you got to the actual city Baldur's Gate. I loved that part of the game because you were in this one area, one big city, and it was all these
Grand
different
Theft Auto.
cultures. People, yeah, exactly. It was just happening there, and that was my favorite part of that game. And so this has been long in my head of like, let's just create a city where they're really isolated and people are, forced of all different cultures and races and different backgrounds, and everybody has to kind of come through this hub city. And that's what Veloth is this I call it this Veloth, the city of hope. It's where basically you have one city on the edge of a desert called the Waste, where there's a bunch of there's two big nations that are trading, and the only way to really get between the nations is to go long distances around the horn of this continent, and Veloth is sort of the only stop along the way. And what makes it interesting, I guess, is that I've always found that magic is a lot of fun in certain games, but it can also become this like crutch and power move that a lot of people use to just overcome situations instead of really thinking through how to solve problems creatively with what the resources they got. And so I actually made it so there's no wizards within the world, so there's not a lot of magic, thinking more like a Game of Thrones sort of style. It's sort of mystical, if you want to say that, and the gods are sort of paying attention within the world. Okay. And so you have basically like a few religions and some clerics, but not a lot of wizards. But
have you ever seen the movie Mad Max?
I have, actually. Yeah, yes, kind of like that. But I wanted to have some sorcerers because I like the idea of people who have it in their blood, they're born with it. They're rare, like some people who are like rarely born with the ability to create magic. But with great power comes, problems too. So yeah. The whole idea is that what I call them is blooders. Blooders are sort of my version of the sorcerers, and the wind up people dive into getting these powers, or they discover they have these powers, but as they get older, it makes them go insane, and sort of the power itself corrupts them, and so they slowly get more and more out of touch with reality, which leads to a lot of problems when you get lots and lots of ability to wield fire or manipulate people's minds. So the city of Veloth and the nations have found a place called the Block, which is this island prison in the center of Veloth that they house all the blooders that are discovered. So there's this search for people who are blooders, and anybody who is discovered to have magical powers is chased down and thrown into the Block. That's essentially the situation from which I started the campaign. And what was interesting to me about it was getting to have the players play police officers in an environment like that.
So are the police officers in the hunt for the other blooders, or are they working for the blooders?
Not yet. They're not really looking for blooders yet. They are more like beat cops. We didn't want to get them into the blooder hunt yet, because I think that might be an interesting arc down the road, but we're working up to it. What we have is really they're kind of like beat cops. The downtrodden. They're not really respected even. Some of them are. Some of the people, some of the races within the world, like there's beasts like half orcs and gnolls and kitsune, and that they're a little less respected than say humans or people who are non-beasts. And so a lot of the police force is made up of humans, and then this group has a half orc and a kitsune in it, and a gnome, and one human. Who's kind of washed up a little bit, and so they all have a little bit of their own chip on their shoulder and something to prove. But I didn't want to start them early on, being in like a really epic situation. I wanted to have them start off sort of getting to know the area and discovering the world, and expanding that knowledge through, again, like the first episode is just called Market Duty because it's this kind of crummy job for a police officer to have to do, but they stumble into one of the biggest cases that's going on in the city, which is the theft of the Sapphire Rose. So, yeah, it starts off looking like it's going to be kind of a normal beat cop type of thing, but then they find their way into some big adventures along the way.
So have you played D&D with these people before? You said that you basically have friends from all over that are in this campaign.
Yeah, well, I should qualify. We don't actually play D&D. You'll even notice the first episode of our podcast is we're not playing D&D 5th edition until we get sponsored. We play Pathfinder, and the reason for that is, yeah, it's cool to say we want to get sponsored, all that kind of stuff. But the other reason is just I'm not super familiar with 5th edition. I've played a lot of 3.5. I played a lot of Pathfinder, and I just didn't really want to go in learning a whole new system, doing a homebrew campaign for a podcast. I was like, yeah, I just want to stick with it. So we played on that. Sorry, I got sidetracked with that. What was your question again?
You played with these guys before in the past, right?
A couple of guys, yeah. But two of these people had never played before, which was interesting.
I'm going to ask you about that because I listened to some of the podcasts, and it sounded like there was a couple of new players that were still trying to figure things out.
Definitely. So we have, Spencer on one side who plays Steve, and he's the gnome. I've played with Spencer a few times and actually got him into Pathfinder. He's played through even this specific world. I've run a few campaigns within Veloth with him. Another guy, Glenn, plays Tony Swagger, who's like a ranger. And I played with very briefly in a previous campaign. Same thing, but both Trent and Emily, so Trent, who plays Jinzo, had listened to a lot of D&D podcasts, but he'd never actually played D&D. He was a big Adventure Zone guy. He loved, Critical Role and all those, but it was his first time actually playing and getting to being a part of a campaign. And then Emily, we kind of like, we need a girl in this. So, who knows someone? And Trent was like, yeah, I know someone pretty cool. She's awesome and she's funny. And so we invited Emily, and she plays Gorgon, who's the half-orc police officer. And she'd never played D&D either. And so they were coming in a little bit noobs. So the first episode was, a little bit rough in terms of some of the rules, but I also cut out a lot of the rule stuff of like, okay, add this. I do editing to kind of make those a little more palatable for the new listener. Mm-hmm. And as they go along, what's nice is I think we're up to 10 episodes now, these guys really are dialed in with like what's important, what they're doing. They've got into the role playing. So it's been really cool to see if you follow the progression of the episodes, every episode steadily kind of builds upon the next. Yeah. And we've seen that actually with our audience too. Is like once people kind of get to the third or fourth episode, we don't lose people. We have a lot of like the same amount of downloads for the third or fourth episode as we do on our 10th episode, which is really cool.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, that is really good.
Yeah, I think the big thing is the story that's going to suck people in, and the role playing as well. The rules, I mean, the DM can just go with it as the sessions go, but the role playing story, that's what really makes a campaign interesting.
Yeah, well, that's always been my thought too. Yeah, I don't know if you've had this experience where my first experience playing D, I wasn't a DM, I was a player, but I had a DM who just we had moments of really fun times, but most of it was just fun because we were all hanging out and just doing that. But I wasn't super engaged with always like the story or the characters. The role playing kind of lacked sometimes, especially when I was we were all kids, didn't really know what we were doing. But when I remember playing and getting a chance to run my first campaign as a DM, I really wanted to shift that to be more the focus and less on like, okay, let's go to the rule book and look up how you do this specific, spell or move, and more about how do you deal with this situation, and do you always rely on fighting, or can you find a creative solution that's not involving fighting? And yeah, there's a little bit. I love the random roll of the dice, and being able to have people uh, have that random element of like how well it works versus how badly it works. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic. But there's a lot of satisfaction people get out of role playing and finding solutions that don't just involve like swinging your axe at it and killing whatever it is, or turning the party into murder hobos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like your campaign is probably a little more role play heavy than fighting, correct?
Well, one of the benefits of making them police officers, and I knew going into this with some newer players, and I recommend this for any DM if you are bringing in new players to something, it's almost good to have them in a system or a place like maybe they're in a military thing, or they're in something that has a little bit of a set structure, like a police precinct, where they have a sergeant, the person who runs the police precinct, and you can very easily direct your players and be very high directive when they're new and learning the game and figuring it out. And the nice thing is, them playing police officers, there is this gray area of like, how much force are they allowed to use, or should they be using? So automatically that took away the idea of being, say, like a evil murder hobo, and just like, oh, we're gonna kill this person who's not giving us information. Really, they're going around talking to people to find witnesses or discover what's going on. They're trying to unlock a mystery, and they can't just go in there and like kill the bad guys. They've got to actually start digging around to find the clues, and then they've got to start connecting the dots. And not everything's going to be solved by an axe. And they have to navigate their way through their social skills, or through being clever with how they manipulate the reality. Sometimes they, will use magic or like clerical magic to change their appearance to pretend to be other people. Sometimes that works out great. Sometimes it doesn't work out so well for them, and they wind up, stumbling through a mystery that winds up, I think, paying off pretty well in the end.
Yeah, I actually sometimes find that running a game with brand new players is almost more fun in a sense, because sometimes, especially if you're playing with predominantly males, we have a way to just want to be murder hobos and kill everything. Whereas whenever you have a new player in there, they might not be as familiar with combat and not look at it and like, okay, I'm not just trying to kill shit and get loot. They look at it of like, okay, how can we figure out how to fix this situation? Sometimes killing that person is not the best answer to the situation. So in my experience, new players have actually sometimes been, I don't want to say the best players, but the most creative, and it's the freshest breath of fresh air, if you will.
I agree with that. Sorry, what were we going to say?
They're testing the waters and trying to figure out what they can do in this world and what they can do in this game, and that sometimes that makes for better role playing and better decisions by them on what to do and how to handle situations.
Mm-hmm. I super love the creative solutions for people, and using things like, okay, this person's really good at intimidating people, so the key for this, especially when dealing with new players, because sometimes they can be hesitant to role play because they're newer, and especially if they're nervous about it. I kind of like, as the DM, you kind of have to set the pace and lead the way with the role playing, I find, in order for them to be able to get into it. And so for a lot of people, some of our audience that I've been talking to have asked for some DM tips, or said like, oh, how do I get started with a campaign, or how do you get my people to not just turn into murder hobos, right? And I'm sure you guys might have some advice on that too. But I always find that when you really start people into some great role-playing scenes where you've really actually played out in your mind how it's going to go, maybe even scripted some of it from your side, like a lot of the things that Wallace, their sergeant, he comes in and he'll be like, all right, morons, come on, let's go talk. And like, in my office, 5 minutes, it gets them to be, okay, I got to go listen to this. And really, like, you're doing voices with them. They kind of think like, okay, this is the standard for the game. You're kind of setting the pace that first session with people. And what's interesting is when you get that when you kind of lead them down that path, so many of the new players and so many players will wind up leading down that path and exploring something new that they wouldn't. That's why it's almost great, as you were saying, to bring in a new player, even with an old group, to bring in and say like, hey, this is the kind of campaign we want to try, and you set the pace by insisting on role playing, or asking them to like, okay, now do this as your character. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Do it as your character, and we'll, interact that way as if you're in the scene. And sometimes it takes them a few times to get it. And I just stop interacting with them as a DM. I just keep interacting with them as Wallace, and then they finally start to get like, oh wait, yeah, I got to talk in my character voice and be that way.
And as a DM too, I mean, role playing can sometimes be uncomfortable. Sometimes be like a little weird, little strange. Whether you're using a different sort of body language or a different voice or whatever. I think the most important thing for a DM, especially early on in a campaign, or just with new players in general, is do not break character. Because if you break character, then your player's going to see that, and then they're going to break character as well. Whereas if you stay, persistent and diligent with staying in that damn character, then your players will also do the same. One common mistake that I personally have run into with DMing, and especially with staying in character, and I've heard other players as well, and just playing with different groups, is if you are whether you're a brand new DM or you're an expert DM, anytime you have two NPCs in a social encounter, it's going to be that much harder to role play. Unless you're a very talented actor, then it's really, really, really hard to switch over in the split of a second to that character from this character. And we watch people like Matthew Mercer and those guys do it all the time. The fact of the matter is that is a very hard thing to do. Yeah. And so, especially for any new DMs out there, if you're gonna, role play an NPC or something, just have it be one-on-one. Let it be that one NPC.
Totally. And I would not only second that, but I would also say that, to do otherwise, like if you have, I've made this mistake in some of my earlier campaigns when I was a new DM. I remember I just kept adding NPCs to their party, and it was like a total mistake because I was like, after there was maybe 4 players, and then there was like 3 NPCs in the party, and I'm like, oh God, I keep screwing up and forgetting. You wind up forgetting that NPCs are there because there's too many. You forget that, you wind up being like a ventriloquist because you're like interacting with yourself, trying to get, and then your players sit there like, this isn't fun for us. Yeah. We didn't come here to watch you, talk to yourself. I mean, go do a ventriloquism act. I have nothing against ventriloquists if either of you are ventriloquists, or if we have any of them listen, I like ventriloquists. I'm just saying, that's sort of a weird trait to want to interact with yourself that way. And literally, I don't think that works very well for the players. And I've always said the number one rule for me as a DM is literally just choose fun. The number one thing is to always choose fun. What's the fun road? And fun is not always just fun for me. It's got to be fun for the whole group. And you've got to be thinking about it from the perspective of how do I engage all the people at the table? And the DM has that responsibility to be the person who's like making sure everybody's enjoying and having fun. And that's one of the reasons I love being a DM, is that you get to give people an amazing time, and then they in turn, by doing that, you actually have an amazing time. I find that's when everybody's loving it and interacting with the characters as if it's real. And even when you finish the game, but they're still talking about it like it's real. Yeah. That's that's like such a cool feeling. I mean, I see you nodding your head. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Now, did you, when you set up and you decided to do this podcast, start this campaign, did you reach out to your players? Did they provide backstories? Did you work those backstories with them and how you could possibly tie it into the campaign?
This is a good question because I've done it different ways. This time around I did, but when I originally started this campaign, and because I was playing with a bunch of other people, different group, I remember just saying to them, hey, do you mind if I do like a kind of a one shot, like a nights? I got an idea for a city campaign. People can come in and out. It doesn't matter who's playing. If we can't make it all if this ever happens in a D&D group where you can't get everyone together on the same day, I don't know if that ever happened to you, but it's one of those things that once in a while, it's a little hard to get everybody who's in the party together. If that ever happens, we could just play my campaign and we'll just, it doesn't matter. So I used to have characters that I would just assign to them. And I actually really liked doing that the first few times because it gave them archetypes and characters that I thought would fit with the play. And I've also found that unless someone's really done the work in terms of how to build a character. Sometimes they're not very good at coming up with like what's driving their character or what it is. Whereas like I come sort of from a theater background. I took acting in school, and so when I just got a role that I have to play, I would dig in with that role and then find a way to be. I was actually freeing to come into a role that it wasn't like me. And I found that has been the same way when I've given people characters at the start, and they're like, okay, I'm going to play this like, weathered, drunk police officer who's got this crazy backstory about like a lost love. All right, well, that's interesting for them to dig in because they didn't come up with it. But this time around, because I had some advanced players and some newbies, and they were I really wanted them fired up about their characters. I just said, write your backstories, do as much as you want, and then like just clear it with me, like bring it up with me. I want to see how far it is. And some of them did more than others. Some people really wanted to discover it more as they were going through, and they said, this is a rough idea. And then the rest, some of them gave me like these like long pages of like, oh, here's what I'm thinking. I started in Typhon, and I had all this sort of thing. Like, I don't want to give anything away because I have info on their backstories that I'm going to be weaving through the second season that we're going to be bringing, that we're going to be launching later this year. And so there is stuff that they've put into their backstories that now that they've started to get like a semblance of who their characters are and some of the key NPCs within the world and sort of situated within Veloth, that we're going to really start digging in with like their backstories and things coming back to haunt them, and surprises coming up like that'll be really fun. But yeah, I think it's a great exercise for anyone if they're designing a character to go back and come up with some backstories. And I don't know if you've had this, but having conversations in between my sessions with the individual players, I don't know if they know that I'm doing this, but I've been doing this is I just talk to them in between the sessions about how it went, what were their impressions, what they enjoyed about it. And also I'll just ask them character questions. Like, how did Tony Swagger feel about this thing? And then it makes him think about it. And then he's like, I think that was actually the reaction I was going for. And then when we bring situations like that in, again, they're coming from a stronger place of these are the values my character have. And so they can make a decision.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said to asking your players, okay, what did your character think about that? And I think that's why I find Talks Machina so interesting, is because a lot of the really good questions are, how did Ford feel about this in this particular situation? Mm-hmm. And those are what like really give you insight into how powerful this game really is and how much these actors put into these characters. I think whenever you do those sort of exercises with your group, it just helps them buy into the story a lot more.
And when you can give them opportunities to have character moments too, within the team, within the game, where, like we have Jinzo playing a cleric, and he's really embraced the connection to his god or goddess within the world called Atla, the water god. And so he's always looking for opportunities to filter what's happening through his conception of the world, which is, through Atla. So it's really great for him to be able to find those character moments where, he's scared or he has to pray to Atla to be able to do something because he's not a naturally brave character. And so I try to find moments that allow them to pull those things in. Like Tony Swagger has a backstory that involves, military, trauma in the military. And that's why he wound up going into policing instead of having to get out of the military. And it was just, so what kind of, those kind of things can come up down the road where, he's fronting a lot about how he's the only good cop left, but what is that really going on underneath? And what's really important there. So finding ways for him to be able to connect to even his other partners. And, like there's a really great moment within the podcast where they just sort of decided to do this scene together, which was, Jinzo and Tony Swagger, because they're police partners. And basically Tony Swagger's been ripping on Jinzo the whole time because Jinzo is like the newer cop. He's always scared. He's kind of like a desk paperwork cop. And Tony's always talking about how he's great in the field. But in one of the moments in a fight, Tony Swagger almost dies and Jinzo saves him. So there's a beautiful moment after that where they're in the police precinct and Tony winds up giving him, this kind of cool some memento and keepsake, which in the game actually makes sense because it does give him bonuses and stuff. But they turn that into a character moment that really adds to the connection that those characters have. And it also is kind of funny because of the way their characters interact and the sort of awkward, male persona that Tony Swagger has.
Yeah. Well, so kind of shifting that gear a little bit, but on the topic of role playing. So we've talked a little bit before the podcast, but we're talking about having players, people, real life people, buy into this made up fantasy world. And then also encouraging them to role play, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's sometimes a little strange to hop into the body of a 3 foot tall gnome, and foreign to a lot of people. But in your experiences, how has role playing empowered you in your personal life, your actual life?
You know, as I kind of mentioned before, I came from a theater background, and you know, for me, acting and performing was actually not something that came naturally to me. I was always nervous about being up on stage and doing that, but for the reason I was nervous about doing it, I really felt an obligation to kind of push myself into it because I didn't want to have fear be the thing stopping me. And what's funny is prior to going into theater or acting or anything like that, I was playing D&D, and I remember being in these, you know, sort of role playing situations where what was really exciting to me was playing a character that wasn't like me, where I could be almost anything. And you know, I remember playing my first evil character and thinking to myself, "Oh, this is so cool! I get to actually be evil because I always have to be like the good person in my life, right?" And so that first time you get to
that puppy.
Exactly. Like you're kind of like when you're a teenager, you're like, oh, I'm just going to get excited about that and dig in with that. But I think that's a really healthy and smart way in which to express those types of curiosities rather than actually kicking a puppy. You know what I mean? Like going through that and realizing how you can have aspects to yourself that are not you. And they are still okay to be there. And there are dark parts of ourselves that we can explore within a role-playing situation. And essentially, it's like creating a safe space where you can explore and have fun and play with it, but it doesn't have like real-world consequences. And I think that that's good, but it still has the semblance of consequence because you know, you can realize like, oh, if I do these things and like, yeah, maybe I do, you know, kick a puppy, but that puppy is owned by the Duke, and that Duke is now going to hunt me down and kill me because I kicked his puppy, right? Like there's all these things that can wind up happening out of that, and you do learn that there's responsibility and consequences even for any action you wind up taking. At least I think that's part of the DM's job, is to check the players with those consequences too. But one of the things that I think gets lost is the alignment chart. I don't know if you like. I know one of the things I think about a lot is the alignment chart, because it is a filter in which we all get to see the world. And what I mean by that, of course, is like, you know, lawful good down to chaotic evil, right? Mm-hmm. The alignment chart, there's so many different ways to be. And the decision at the beginning of the game is you are what type of alignment. And there's something really powerful about making that decision early at the beginning of your campaign and saying, these are the views, or this is the way I'm going to interpret the world. And to have multiple alignments within a party, I think really can be interesting, because it forces a lot of the players to actually work through, especially, by the way, if you're a police officer or if you're dealing with police officers in a campaign like ours, they have to deal with, you know, the moral and ethical consequences of certain actions. And if someone's more good and, you know, they don't see just like ends justifies the means, how do they work with someone who 100% just doesn't see the problem in harming somebody to get the consequence, right? And so how do you navigate those types of situations, one from within the party, and also from, you know, throwing complicated or difficult NPCs, you know, someone who's you know, I think about dropping in. I like to usually in my first bit of campaign get a lot of the NPCs to be pretty genuine, and you know, genuinely they start to trust in the NPCs early on in the campaign. But then you can start messing with them down the road, and they start to realize like, oh, maybe some of these people weren't so truthful, or maybe some of these people are actually evil alignment that I thought were good. And so you can really create great enemies for people that way. You can really force people to think about like, man, not everyone's looking at the world the way I am.
Yeah.
I think there's a real power in that, in having a role-playing experience that challenges you to think differently than the way you are.
Absolutely. We were talking with Nick, who is the one of the DMs for Dice Ministries, and we were talking about how sometimes you can you can build up your NPCs so big to the point where when you do introduce them, your players freak the fuck out. So I think it was him that talked about how they've got a player that ended up betraying them, and now anytime that that player gets mentioned, the whole party just gets absolutely livid. But having a situation where we can trust Jim Bob in the beginning, and he's our friend, and he helped us get to that very first dungeon that lasted 3 or 4 sessions, and then maybe at the last moment, as soon as you recovered that one magic item, he stabs you in the back and then takes off with it.
Yeah, I can't wait to, like, there's a couple. I've just been so excited about getting season 2 started recording for that. We haven't started playing for it, but I've been planning for it, and I'm super excited to get through some of the planning to create some of those moments with the NPCs that have been brought up in the first season. And I'm not going to tell people who's who, because some are good, some are not, some are exciting, some are not. So people will have to tune in and check it out to find out.
So it sounds like you have a really good, model for your podcast. So kind of, would you mind sharing with us what you have in store? I mean, is this something that you want to monetize? What were your motives for starting this whole thing?
I think the first rule of anything to do with, putting out content online is just make sure you love doing it in the first place. Because, I could put out content towards other things that might be easier to monetize, like I'm in my regular life where I'm not a DM, I'm in digital marketing. I know a lot about marketing and sales and that kind of thing, but and I could do courses around that, but I'm not really it's not the same passion level, and I want to do something I really love doing. And if you're going to be putting out daily content around a subject, make sure you love it. That's just rule number 1. Do it because you love doing it, not because you want to make a ton of money. That's the first advice I'd say for anyone who's thinking man, I'm going to get a podcast and then I'll be rolling it. That doesn't work that way, right? But the idea of putting out content that, one, I love and that other people really engage with, and I love to see other people enjoy the content. That's super gratifying for me, and it's also gratifying for our players to have, when we get people doing fan art for us, or we've had people do, just sending us or do reviews or send us oh my gosh, I really loved the last episode. That kind of stuff means a lot to us and makes us feel really great. That's awesome. But yeah, it'd be great to make some money too. Down the road, I feel if I'm looking to monetize this, it'd be something maybe there'll be some merch down the road that people could buy. I think it'd be really cool to be doing some live streaming casts, and then maybe some gated content with Patreon. I know the ad model is also sort of what everyone aspires to be. That'd be cool if we had some ads that I really believed in, right? I want to, if it was something cool that that we were really into and say, oh yeah, we support that. Great. Maybe we could do it, but I don't want to be just shilling for anything. Right. So, and sometimes the ad models can be great, but sometimes they can be just restrictive depending on where you are. But I figure, put out the content, see what kind of audience we can wind up getting. And I think the biggest thing that we can monetize nowadays is attention. And so if we can draw enough attention to what we're doing, well, then what can you do? You can monetize that attention in many different ways. And that might be, but the biggest thing is going to be providing more value to the people who are paying attention to us, because that's why they're paying attention to us. It's not going to be by me pay for our podcast. The podcast, I believe, will almost always be free. I'm pretty sure that'll be the case. But it's one of those things where, hey, they want more content from us, or maybe they want to, DM tips or something like that, or maybe people want to buy parts of the campaign, or they want to run things out of Valoth, or whatever it is. Those kind of things all down the line, maybe we can find a way to have people help support us. And of course, I'm kind of the opinion that if you love a piece of content, or if you really enjoy something, I would support it. I support a number of the podcasts that I really like, and I do that by buying their merch or subscribing to them or paying for them on Patreon. And I'm lucky enough to have a job that I can afford to do those things. So if you don't have money, I don't expect you to send us any money. Don't feel like you got to be broke to help me. All right. I'm just saying that if somebody really loves something and is really getting a lot of value of it, I believe you should pay for it, just because there's a lot of conception nowadays that all content should be free. And I think that's almost bad, because you wind up always having everything be in the advertising model. And the advertising model leads to things like clickbait and problems that when you're just driving all these touches, and it just kind of perverts the authenticity of the art. I'm much more under the idea of like a Netflix model where I just want to pay for the ability to get something cool, and you guys make content that I like. So continue to make that great content, and I'll keep buying it. So.
And we've got a lot of people that reach out to us to be on this little teeny tiny podcast. And at the end of the day, Keith and I, we can both agree on this. We always have people on that are authentic and genuine. I mean, every person we've had on, I could sit there and talk to them for hours. And at the end of the day, they're all just people that like playing Dungeons and Dragons and rolling dice. And that's why we started this, is because we just want to chat about D&D. But on the topic of just producing content, Keith, I know you had experience within the fitness industry, producing content, things like that. Give us your take on how dramatically different the D&D community is from, IG fitness and things like that.
Yeah, I have the brief stint doing the fitness page when I was trying to just do it. I have my full-time job, but I was trying to do that part-time on the side. And I started doing a YouTube page and Instagram on fitness and stuff like that. But I didn't, like Chris said, I didn't love it. I enjoyed working out. I didn't love sharing that with people as much. I was kind of forcing it. And, it wasn't a great experience. And also the fitness industry, especially on IG, it's not as welcoming. It's more about look at me, look at me, look at me, not sharing knowledge. And if they're trying to share knowledge, it's to immediately make money. And that is the only reason they're doing it, not because they want to help people. The D&D community is the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Everybody is so welcoming. Everybody is so free with information. Everybody is so willing to help each other. And like Chris said, support each other too. People, if they have a podcast, they're not sitting there trying to say, hey, watch our podcast. They're supporting other podcasts while they're producing their own content. And people producing the content because they enjoy it, just like you said with us doing this podcast. We both love talking about D&D. We started talking about D&D with each other like a year or so ago. And it's grown into this because of our for it. And it comes easier.
Yeah. And that's where I feel like, I just want to say, like, one, I really appreciate you guys, especially since I'm pretty new. Like, I only really started getting into the D&D online community at all within, like, beginning of May is when I started the Instagram. And because we're like, and I'll tell you, I had someone ask me, how hard is it to start a podcast? It's like literally just pick a date to release it and then commit to that date. Because I had been working on this podcast for almost like 6 months or a year almost in my head, and playing and cutting and editing and doing all this stuff for a year before I just said, like, you know what, just pick a day. And I finally did, and then started building towards it. But really appreciate that you, even though I'm very new in the community, we just got started, that I was able to connect with you guys and be able to, actually come on and talk about something like this. It's amazing how welcoming the community really is, and also how supportive they are of good, solid content. And I see you guys putting out a lot of it consistently. And so I encourage anyone who's listening to this who isn't following you guys to go follow and check it out, because it's pretty awesome.
We appreciate that. Yeah. And Keith, I just got to say, man, it's been an absolutely incredible journey. It's been fun, just watching the community grow and being kind of the guys bearing the flag and running out front. And it's really awesome to see just the level of, I guess, not commitment, but interest, and that people like look up to us and they're excited for things, and they ask us questions because they value our opinion. And that's all just really awesome. And it's such a wonderful community. But I did want to ask you, Chris, so these are all pre-recorded, correct? You basically just recorded them at the time and then you edited them and then did it and then released it, right?
Yeah, pretty much pre-recorded. We might do some live stuff in the future, but especially since they were new and I knew there's going to be a lot of rules stuff in there, I wanted the ability to edit, and that just made everybody a little more comfortable. So, yeah.
Yeah. How many episodes are going to be in season 1?
I initially thought it was going to be 10, and then I went up going through the episodes and realized, like, oh crap, I got to cut these down because I want the episodes to be under 2 hours. Like, most episodes, in case you're wondering how long they are generally between an hour to 2 hours. But I think the longest episode is an hour and 45 or hour 50 minutes, and like the shortest, like an hour and 5. So you're looking at quite a range there. And the thing that I think maybe makes it a little bit unique is that we don't just have, it's not just us playing. It's it's produced. So we match. I put there's sound effects. There's like atmosphere music, mood music, like things that basically really create the scene and create the story.
I do love the music, by the way.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I spent a lot of time looking for music that I can use, and I've always been passionate about creating the right atmosphere in it, and I'm glad that's resonating. But yeah, we really spend time to make that into an immersive experience for people, which is what I really love about D&D. Is I think it's an immersive experience, and that is so lacking in today's society where everything is kind of just on our phones, or it's like, very quick. And the idea of having long form immersive experiences is just less and less, and I think worth more and more. So that's why I continue to do it. I don't know if I answered all your questions. I kind of went on a few tangents there, but I think so.
How many episodes is it going to be?
Oh, how many episodes? Yeah, sorry. That was the original question. I have a tendency to do that, just go off on things. But I thought it was going to be 10. It's looking like it might be 12, maybe 14, depending on how the next 2 episodes get cut. Because I ran out of runway, and I'm just frantically cutting now, trying to keep up with the weekly posting schedule. So, yeah.
Okay.
But it's looking like it might be 12 or 14. I won't be more than 14 though. So.
And that 2-hour range for your content, that's actually a good range, because asking people to invest 3.5, 4 hours, which is what a lot of people's sessions are each session, asking them to invest that much of their personal time to watch you is a lot. So the fact that you keep it that short, I think that's a big factor in you attracting attention and keeping viewers.
Yeah, I think that is really important, and you like, there's a lot of stuff I cut that might seem like it was good, but it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like it's on. I try to keep everything when I'm editing, like what's really essential and what's really important to the plot and to move it forward. And there's some things that just turn into scenes because they were like them just having a quick conversation. But then if you bookend it with some sound effects and some atmosphere music, now it becomes a scene, and you can really tell the story that way. So it's that's what one of my main objectives with this is, to make it into something people, even if they aren't into D&D, I want people to be able to listen to it and kind of follow what's going on. I'm sort of weird in this way, but like, I think that everybody likes D&D, they just don't know it yet. Maybe you guys feel that too, but I feel like that's part of one of our missions at You Roll the One is to spread the love and passion for role playing that empowers people to live their own epic life. That's one of our missions, and I think it's because there's a lot of conception around like, oh, D&D, isn't that nerdy thing that people were worshiping Satan in the 80s? Like, what was that? And I was like, no, it's not that actually. There's a lot more.
It's not Satan.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Cyric. All right. But you wind up getting people, I think. I really believe that if people were to genuinely be exposed to going through it, or to actually play through a game, the vast majority of people would love it and actually get into it. And I think in many ways, D&D is sort of a frontier that might actually become. I really think it's a trend that will continue to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. I just see, again, like the tendency for more and more people to want to find ways to get together that don't involve, a digital space, right? Like, or something that isn't Instagram or something on our phones. It's really about connecting with people and having something regular that's almost like a community that you really can connect and have fun and play. I think that play aspect is just something we don't always get much in our work lives or regular lives, and we can engage our fantasy brains. And once you do that, I don't think you'll ever come back. So
the rise of the professional DM, man. There's a couple articles about some guys. There's one gentleman in New York, and there's another fella. I can't remember where he's from, but they dungeon master for a living. Like corporate executives hire them to come in and do like team building exercises.
Oh man. And there's that isn't there like a big experience, almost like a theme park somewhere in the States, that is like a LARP that people go through, and people pay to have the full LARPing experience going through, but it's like a whole story, and corporations will pay to have their whole team go through it because somebody in there turns out to be the hero, and like the whole thing is set up with actors. I've heard of that. I don't know.
There's a place in Utah.
Yeah, team building and stuff like that. It does a bunch of exercises for them to do problem solving, team building, all that kind of stuff, and that's what a lot of D&D is about.
Yeah.
It really is just about finding like creating a safe space where people feel comfortable enough to kind of let loose. And it's amazing how rare that is in our society nowadays, that we get to just sort of let loose. We're always under the eyes of, what we're, our work or our jobs or our family or our friends, like whatever. We don't want to be judged. And, when I was in theater school, they kind of like created that space for us in the classroom so that we as actors could play. And I think that what I try to do in my campaigns is create a space similar to that where my players and people who are within the campaign can also play. And I encourage DMs to really try and, again, like smile, have fun, and be light and have, just try to play more with it, because there's so very few times that we get a chance to be connected that way in our lives, and I just think it's a rarity, and I think the more we can do it, the healthier we wind up being as individuals.
Can't agree more, man. And I definitely think there's something to be said for just letting go of that insecurity and just diving in head first.
Well, I'll tell you something too. Like, one of the things I like to do as a DM is I do reward role playing. Like, I don't know if you talked about this, but I always say, like, hey, the roles will determine what happens. It's going to be an important factor, but it's never the only factor. Like, if you do an amazing scene and like you're rolling a bluff, or you're really trying to do a diplomacy check of some sort to get a certain objective, and you're clever about it, you're smart about it, you role play it well with me, like, I'm going to give you bonuses. Like, I'm going to give you, like, maybe it's roll advantage in 5th edition. In Pathfinder, I'll give you a +2 or a +4 or whatever it happens to be, right? Like, I'm going to give you something to make it into that. And I'm also going to look at, like, what's going to suit the plot so that people feel that it's, are going to have more fun and be excited about the outcome. So I think you're always thinking about that as a DM, like, what's this going to do for the player, and how are they going to feel? And sometimes they don't do a good job. I'm like, it's good to shut them down. Like, you don't want to be a yes DM where you just let them succeed in everything either. You've got to test them. But if they do legit stuff, you're growing them. You're almost forcing them as people to grow as they go through your campaign. And that's the real thing that keeps people coming back to play your campaign, by the way. I really think that's part of it, is that people feel like they're growing and getting better as they play through your campaign. And if you can do that as a DM and layer those things in, I think people are going to be fired up about playing whatever world you want.
Yeah. And Keith, I know that's something that you do a really good job at, is saying no, like, it didn't work, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Occasionally I might get a little pushback, but that's all good. They like to try and test me sometimes, but it is situations where you can't succeed at things, or what your idea is just not going to work.
Yeah. And letting them like go through and role play it, or let them like fully fledge it out. And at the end of the day, like, even if you rolled well, like, I'm sorry, it does not work.
Yeah, totally.
A situation where using charisma scores, using rolls, you can't talk your way out of it. We've had that happen recently. Hard way.
You can't always seduce your way out of everything. I tell that to bards all the time. All right, just
all the time.
We had I'll share this quick story. We have a barbarian in our group. I actually play in a campaign for one of my players that he DMs. And one of the guys, he's newer to D&D, likes to read a lot, so he knows a lot about D&D. But there's a situation where he's essentially trying to free his friend that was tied up from as an NPC. And due to some really shitty rolls, made too much noise and attracted the attention of guards. And the DM describes the guards walking up, and he says, "What are you doing over here?" And then the player just had no idea what the fuck to say. She thought it was a pretty easy grab and go. And he just like looks at all of us, and he's like puts his hands. "So what seems to be the problem here, officers?" And then the DM, like, we all started dying laughing. And the DM just is like, roll a persuasion check.
Yeah.
And then he rolled like a 19 or something. The DM's like, "Yeah, no." He's like, "They arrest you." That was one of those like circumstances like, "Nah, man, sorry."
Yeah. But I love the attempt. I always encourage my players to try whatever they're going to try. I try not to. I mean, I will say sometimes I put ideas in their head where it's like, "Are you sure you want to put that are you sure you want to split up the party right now? Like, is that how you want to do this? Because I generally don't like people splitting the party because, again, it affects the overall objective, which is fun. A lot of times that can be a challenging thing, as if they splitting the party. But if they want to try something in combat, like Steve in our campaign he's a little gnome, he's a rogue, and he has a hook hand. He only has one hand. So he's not a great fighter, and he can't. And he's always trying to do things, but he's like, I want to jump off the stool, do a backflip, and like hit him from behind. And I'm like, roll, see what happens, man. Because you know what, the few times that it does work or the things happen, that's why he's playing. That's why he's playing, right? You got to give him that opportunity to get that success and make him feel like a badass once in a while. And I'm going to see if that happens. And of course, I want this. I don't want all my NPCs to win or the monsters to win. I want to see my people, kick butt and make them all feel like badasses too. And so, yeah, let them try. Let them try anything within reason. I think is cool.
Yeah. Nah, that's awesome. Well, fellas, Chris, Keith, thank you so much for coming on here with me. Keith, is there anything else you wanted to ask Chris?
Well, just a regular ending question, but I'll let you close it up.
Yes. So we do have a ending question, but first and foremost, I did want to ask both of you, Chris, is there anything else that you got big coming up other than the scheduled programming of your podcast? Any big projects?
Well, people should, if they aren't yet, follow us on Instagram. You rolled a one. That's where you'll get all the updates on anything to do with the podcast. And also, I just do daily cool memes that people seem to really like. So if you just like cool D&D memes, come follow us there. And then you can check out the podcast on anything from Spotify to Stitcher to iTunes. If you dig the content, what really helps us is reviews and ratings. So those kind of things always help us. Or just send us a quick note saying you like it, because we love hearing that too. But other than that, we are looking to do a giveaway, and you guys are getting a special D&D Coalition exclusive, I guess. This is the first time I've mentioned it.
You heard it here first.
Exactly. I knew it was coming on the big show. I had to be like, all right, I got to bring something out. But we are going to be doing a giveaway that we'll be announcing that will also be timing with the last couple of episodes. So I'll be announcing it probably it's looking like it'll be announced before August 1st, within the next 2 weeks. And we're going to time it with the last episodes, and it's going to be a big giveaway. It's going to have fan art components with it. So if you do art, we're looking to have people do fan art because we love that. We're going to have some really cool stuff for people who just like to share the post and share the love about the podcast, and a few other cool qualifications for it. But there's going to be some really dope stuff in it, and I'm excited to announce that. But be on the lookout for that. So go follow You Roll the One and stay tuned for the big You Roll the One Professor Epic awesome giveaway number 2 for the finale.
Awesome, and Keith, what about you big studly man?
Well, thank you. Well, of course, you can follow me at fire.and.dice on Instagram, and then Fire and Dice on YouTube. And the only big things we have coming is, of course, you and I will be at Gen Con in Indianapolis coming up in just, 3 weeks, I think?
Yes.
Wow, that's getting close. And then I do have a lot more content coming on the YouTube channel. I've been working on doing a lot more videos for DM tips. Of course, the Friday Night Fight videos are always there, but I'm trying to add more of that DM tip videos are coming out. I got a couple more coming soon, and then some more fireside chats with some of the guys in the group where we just all sit down and talk about some of the topics in D&D.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Chris, we'll go ahead and get our closing questions. My question for you is, if you could either play at a table or DM for anybody, could be celebrity, actor, could be past president, whatever, who would it be?
Gosh, that's a good question. Man, I think I would like to. I would love to play. If I can choose two things, I'd love to play with Matt Mercer because I think he's just an amazing DM, and I love his energy and everything he does with voices and acting. I just feel like we're in a similar vein in terms of how we like to play D&D. I think it'd be amazing to play with him. But if I could actually DM with someone, man, that's a tough one.
No pressure.
I think it would be Daniel Day-Lewis, just to see how crazy he would get. with his character. Yeah, because I think like he would never break character, right? He's a method actor, and I think that would be he's a method actor, so he's a guy who like when he played Lincoln never. He would go home to his wife still dressed as Lincoln. So I kind of want. I kind like he's that method. He was always like Daniel Day-Lewis when he was an actor in every movie he's done plays the character and does not until they finish filming. So I would love to have Daniel Day-Lewis just play one of my characters for like 6 months while we played every week, and he'd just be like badass. he would never leave the character. So that would be kind of a cool and awesome experience to have Daniel Day-Lewis be a method actor playing whatever orc role or whatever role he wanted in one of my campaigns. That would be awesome.
Yo, Daniel, put some fucking deodorant on, man. It's been 4 weeks.
Yeah, I'm sure his wife would love that. love it for Megan. You're going to play a half orc.
And then Keith,
you don't bathe, an evil one.
Exactly.
All right, so my question actually is on the flip side. So we've heard a lot about your DM and stuff like that, but what is the favorite race class or basically favorite player you've ever used as a PC?
I had a player named Sinbad that I called that was a bard, and I know it might just sound typical. My favorite was the bard, and I was in theater and all that, but it really was. I just and he was basically, I talked to the DM about having my alignment actually be secret, and I had to stay in the party. I was actually a chaotic, evil, sociopathic, evil, person, but I came across as a wonderful and very charismatic performer. But I was secretly killing people behind everyone's backs wherever we went, and so I was like one of these. It was a total. Like Dexter kind of. I think I was inspired by Dexter at the time when I was watching that. Like I was a closet serial killer going through, and it just led to some real funny situations in the campaign because the characters kept noticing people dying, and then slowly they would they were slowly figuring out I think someone in the party is killing these people, and then that became a very fun situation. But anyway, his name is Sinbad, and it's yeah, and I mean, they should have really known from the name, right? Sin bad. Yeah. It wasn't called Sin Good. So
did they ever figure out it was you, the party?
Unfortunately, that game got disbanded before we got to a finale. Isn't that? I hate when that happens. But people move. Life happens when you're in your 20s, and it had to happen. But for a while, we had a few really good sessions where people, and eventually, of course, it came out that that was the way it was when the campaign kind of disbanded. But at that point, we didn't care as much. But yeah, that was probably my favorite character to play because I always liked having the double story and being able to do things behind people's backs. I was always a bit sneaky. Makes me a good DM.
Yeah, I love it. Well, guys, thank you for coming on. And everybody watching, thank you for watching. We'll get this up on YouTube ASAP. Guys, go ahead. Feel free to follow these two brilliant gentlemen. They produce excellent content. You can find me on Instagram at DnD.Coalition. Also, we got our YouTube channel, our Twitch channel, and I pretend to be on Twitter sometimes. So thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful night. See ya.
Appreciate it. Stay epic. Stay epic, everybody.